Hello everyone, friends. You are on Ruslan Belov's channel, and this is a daily summary of combat operations from the Ukrainian front. Today has brought a multitude of extremely significant events, so let us proceed to analyzing them. We will begin our review with the situation on the Karkov-Belgorod line, from where information is coming in that since early morning, Ukrainian formations have been striking Belgorod using HIMARS rocket systems. The attack is of a massive nature and has not stopped for many hours already. According to sources, the shelling began from the very morning, meaning that the fire impact, including the use of HIMARS launchers, has been continuing for no less than 10 hours. If we consider the presence of visual evidence, then all photo and video materials from Belgorod demonstrate exclusively the work of air defense. The sky, bursts and traces of interceptions, presumably downed missiles, and the like are visible in the frame. At the time of creating this review, information about specific damaged objects or explosions recorded on the ground was absent in the public domain. At the same time, reports arrived that by the end of the day, on January 26, 2026, the Russian Federation began inflicting retaliatory strikes on Kharkov. Most likely, materials of objective control will appear in the near future, which will allow assessing what exactly became the targets of the attacks. Next, let us transport ourselves to the Kiev area. Today, data is coming in that a large number of Russian Geran-type drones have been spotted in the sky over the capital, conducting reconnaissance activity. Ukrainian resources claim that these drones are circling over objects of energy and critical infrastructure. Judging by everything, the Russian side is conducting additional reconnaissance of targets. There exists a very high probability that quite soon Russia will inflict another powerful combined strike on Kiev, using tens of missiles and hundreds of drones. In parallel, information is coming from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine that over the past night, 138 drones were launched towards Ukraine, of which 110 were successfully shot down or suppressed. A similar picture is taking shape at the front, and all these combat actions, reconnaissance flights, and mutual strikes in Kharkov and Belgorod are occurring against the backdrop of Vladimir Zelensky's statements regarding the negotiation process. Zelensky asserts that the Treaty on Security Guarantees from the United States is 100% ready. At this moment, he is awaiting the signing of this agreement. At the same time, the Ukrainian president emphasizes that a signature alone is insufficient. He demands that the document on security guarantees be not simply signed but also ratified by both the American Congress and the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Probably only after passing the ratification procedure will Zelensky be ready to begin a dialogue about a peaceful settlement of the conflict. On the other hand, Zelensky categorically states that Ukraine will under no conditions withdraw its troops from the territory of Donbass. The Russian Federation, in turn, insists that without the withdrawal of troops from Donbass, a political diplomatic solution is impossible. Thus, we observe an absence of compromises and any convergence of positions between Moscow and Kiev, which testifies to the inevitable continuation of combat actions. Next, we will move to the Sumy sector of the front, regarding which a multitude of satellite images has appeared. Relying on the opinion of a number of experts, one can notice that both the local power station and the boiler house continue to function in Sumy. This indicates that right now, additional reconnaissance of this locality is likely underway, and strikes may follow shortly. Furthermore, video recordings of FPV drone attacks along the next line of defense in the areas of Kotin and Pizarevka are being published. On these frames, it is visible how the Ukrainian side continues to pull reserves to these populated areas, obviously preparing to repel a possible offensive by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. We are moving to the northeastern borders of the Kharkov region. In this sector of the front, insignificant changes in the line of combat contact are noted in the vicinity of the populated areas of Nestyarnoye and Krugloye. The map was updated in precisely this way over the past 24 hours. Video materials disseminated by Ukrainian resources served as the basis for making corrections. Recorded on these recordings are strikes by FPV drones, the target of which, judging by everything, became Russian reconnaissance groups attempting to penetrate the territory of the village. Analyzing the geolocation of the impact sites, one can come to the conclusion that Russian troops are currently conducting active assault actions regarding this settlement. Probably already in the near future, Official reports of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm the advance on this vector. A little to the south, extremely significant frames are arriving from the area of the Gusinka railway station. The conduct of reconnaissance operations by the Russian side is documented in this video. In the process of observation, a storage site for unmanned aerial vehicles was uncovered, on which fire damage was immediately inflicted with the help of drones and possibly missile weaponry. The author of the clip does not specify the concrete number of enemy losses, but considering the immediate proximity of the warehouse to the front line, it is logical to assume that the AFU planned to utilize these drones for organizing counterattacks on the Kupiansk agglomeration. Regarding the situation in Kupiansk itself, today frames of a Ukrainian drone flight over the northwestern and northern districts of the city appeared online. As one can notice, the populated area has not yet been wiped off the face of the earth completely. However, the overwhelming majority of structures have damage, and the sensation is created that from 60 to 80% of the housing stock is either destroyed or seriously suffered. The battle for Kupiansk continues. Next, we move to the Lyman direction, from where information arrives that Russian forces are gradually strengthening and improving their position in the southeastern and eastern quarters of the populated area. Today, Ukrainian channels demonstrate video recordings of attacks by their FPV drones on positions of Russian troops along Pushkin Street, in the area of house number 49. Relying on these frames, we are making small corrections to the map, effectively shifting the grey zone in favor of the Russian army. Furthermore, over the city itself, Russian drones are constantly loitering, preventing the concentration of Ukrainian infantry and defense forces in this sector. The fighting does not subside, and despite tactical successes and the adjustment of the front line, the main defense line of Lyman at the current moment still retains integrity. A little to the south, Russian units have established tight control over all crossings across the Severki Donets river and continue to hold them in their sights. On fresh frames, one can see the work of a Russian reconnaissance drone in the area of one of the crossings, which, judging by everything, was recently repaired or restored by the enemy. As soon as the restoration works were completed, Russian artillery inflicted a repeated strike. In the following seconds of the video, it is visible that the bridge is destroyed again and once again requires repair. It is precisely at the expense of constant fire control over these logistical arteries that the Russian command plans to develop the offensive on Lyman. High combat activity is also observed west of Seversk and to the west of the Bakmutka river. Massive use of FPV drones is being recorded. The terrain here is such that practically every forest plantation has been turned into a powerful fortified area. Some strongholds have already been marked on maps, others still remain to be identified. Nevertheless, the advance here is proceeding at not too high a pace. This may be connected both with weather factors and with the high density of enemy personnel, as well as with the huge number of Ukrainian drones operating in this direction. However, a little to the south, in the vicinity of the M03 highway, quite substantial changes in the front line are observed. The map in this section looked different as early as January 24, 2026. Around that time, the Russian side switched to local offensive actions, and now we are forced to make adjustments to the situation practically daily. According to data from various resources, including pro-Russian sources, units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to seriously improve their tactical position along the Golubovka-Privolnaya line. Furthermore, according to assertions by military experts from the Russian side, about 33% of the territory of the populated area of Nikiforovka has passed under the control of the RF army, and assault actions continue to develop. Simultaneously, Russian detachments are conducting an active advance through the fields west of the Bakmutka river, heading towards such settlements as Ry-Alexandrovka and Kolaniki. Thus, if on the section along the M03 highway the Russian army is advancing quite intensively, then in the area of the Severki Donets, the pace of the advance has slowed somewhat. Next, we move to a review of the situation around Constantinovka. Here, the general picture is sufficiently clear. It is worth paying attention to the abundance of water barriers, rivers, ponds, and various bodies of water. This factor creates the most serious difficulties for the logistics of Ukrainian units, especially in the southern sector. If we consider precisely the southern part, then for supply and maneuver, the AFU effectively has only one transport artery remaining, a kind of bottleneck through which it is possible to transfer reinforcements to the south to stabilize the defense line in the areas of Berostok and Ilyevka. Analyzing the map of strikes, one can notice that practically all FPV drone attacks recorded since January 1, 2026, are concentrated in the northern part, along key routes. Over the past 24 hours, several video recordings have appeared, and all of them demonstrate attempts by the Ukrainian side to transfer equipment to the front line. As soon as the vehicles overcome the mentioned bottleneck, they immediately fall under the fire impact of Russian troops. On these frames, it is captured how they are attempting to drive, among other things, heavy armored vehicles towards Constantinovka. However, it is hit while still on the approaches, literally along Vladimir Vernadsky Street. Video materials record several more units of equipment striving to break through into the city, but being unsuccessfully subjected to strikes. This testifies to full fire control over logistical paths. The transfer of forces to the south is extremely difficult. Mainly, only infantry manages to get to the southern quarters of Constantinovka, and they move on foot. We see frames where AFU stormtroopers attempt to take cover behind structures from kamikaze drone attacks. Despite the active offensive of Russian forces, the Ukrainian defense here, judging by everything, still retains certain resources and reserves, since the map of combat actions has not changed for several days already. This allows assuming that the defensive orders of the AFU in this section are still holding positions. A little to the west, in the Dobropolye-Drushkovka direction, small changes are noted in the area of the populated areas of Toretskoye and Novopavlovka. The map here was corrected over the last 24 hours. Russian sources report that at the current moment, the RF army controls approximately half of Toretskoye and continues to improve positions, moving towards Pavlovka. Even further west, Russian troops are actively developing success in the direction of the populated area of Novy Donbass, as well as towards Dobropolye. It is worth reminding that some cartographers as early as January 19, 2026, marked Novy Donbass as a zone of RF control. However, only today did the first geolocation confirmations appear that Russian forward detachments indeed entered at least the very southeastern part of the settlement, occupying some buildings and forest strips. That is, now there is factual evidence of the advance of the Russian army in this section. Massive strikes with aerial bombs are being inflicted on the populated area of Grishino, mainly on the central part, with the obvious goal of breaking through the defensive formations of the AFU. Several days ago, powerful and rapid offensive dynamics were observed here. However, literally since Friday-Saturday, movement in this section has stalled. Most likely Russian troops have run up against a powerful line of defense, which they are now systematically processing with heavy aviation. On the Dnepropetrovsk vector, Russian units are engaged in leveling the line of combat contact on the segment between Novopavlovka and Ivanovka. Here, changes to the map occur daily, and such dynamics of adjustments have been observed approximately since January 21, 2026. Every day corrections are made, new zones are shaded. As we have already discussed, the design of the Russian command consists in reaching the conditional red line with the goal of uniting the two settlements into a single stable bridgehead. Relying on this line to the north of the Volchya River, the troops plan to develop the offensive further north, towards Bogdanovka, and undoubtedly in the direction of Medjova, as well as towards Veseloye, Alexandrovka, and Antonovskaya. Probably in this same direction, the movement of Russian forces will also be carried out from the side of the populated areas of Udakhnoye and Novoye Podgorodnye. Thus, intensification of combat actions should be expected here. The question remains only in the timing. Will this activation occur during the late winter campaign or already during the early spring stage? We are moving to the Zaporozhye section of the front, where Russian troops, judging by everything, managed to break through the AFU defense on certain segments. Today, messages are arriving about the successful breakthrough of Ukrainian defensive orders and the consolidation of the RF army in the southern part of the populated area of Zaliznichnoye. We are talking about that part of the settlement where the T0814 highway runs. If this information receives confirmation, this will become a truly powerful breakthrough. since the very fact of latching onto Zaliznichnye has huge significance. Effectively, a concentration of forces and fixation of positions is occurring along the second line of defense, running west of Gulyapol and west of the Gaichur River. We will closely watch this story, the development of the situation, and what efforts the Ukrainian side will undertake to restore control. Besides successes in the south of Zaliznichnye, as you see, information is also arriving about the advance in the pocket located between Zaliznichnye and the populated areas of Dorozhnyanka and Zagonoye. These adjustments are confirmed both by various cartographers and by video materials, on which we can observe strikes by Ukrainian drones on Russian forward positions. That is, in this section we see an attempt to level the front along the Mirnoye, Zaliznichnye line and further to Gulyapol, effectively cutting off this salient. We will observe, since in the case that Russian units manage to pass Zaliznichnye, then already from these borders the distance to the city of Orekov and the entire Orekov agglomeration will constitute no more than 25 kilometers. We see that combat activity is now very actively resuming after a certain New Year pause. Simultaneously with the resumption of offensive operations on the territory of Ukraine, a multitude of important news is arriving from the Persian Gulf region, from the side of Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. Today, more and more information is appearing that the American side is building up its military grouping. I would like to accentuate attention on the fact that, although a powerful grouping is being formed now, in its quality and quantitative composition, it differs from those forces that the USA was pulling together back in the summer of 2025, before Operation Midnight Resolve. Let me remind you that during that operation, strikes were inflicted by B-2 strategic bombers on objects of Iran's nuclear infrastructure with the goal of hitting bunkers and similar fortifications. Today, a buildup of forces is underway. Destroyer-class ships have arrived, aircraft carriers have approached, but the most important thing, so far, the presence of B-2 bombers is not being recorded. This creates a high probability that the next escalation and the coming conflict will pursue somewhat different goals, distinct from those that were set in 2025. Judging by everything, this time strikes may be inflicted exclusively by Tomahawk missiles, as well as, possibly, by aircraft. Individual experts have already hypothesized that objects of oil and gas infrastructure may become the target of attacks. Another portion of extremely interesting news is arriving today from China. Information is coming in about the arrest of several deputies of Xi Jinping. Possibly an investigation has been started regarding them. Probably they will be presented with accusations of corruption, as well as possibly treason, if such articles are provided for in China. Information is also arriving that these deputies possibly passed to the USA information regarding China's nuclear technologies. This is in actual fact a most serious scandal, which may lead to unpredictable consequences, including that this event may push China to define more clearly its participation in a possible potential conflict between Iran and the United States of America. And that is all, dear friends.